The first time I caught them tapping into my well, I gave the HOA a warning. The second time, I installed cameras. The third time, that's when I called my lawyer. My name's Garrett Collins, and I live on a quiet corner lot just outside the main loop of the Briar Hills neighborhood. I've been here 10 years, kept to myself, paid my dues, and even showed up to a couple of those soul-sucking HOA meetings mostly to stay off their radar. It all started when the HOA president, Lorraine Kessler, showed up at my door last summer with her clipboard, and that fake customer service smile pulled tight across her face. "Garrett," she said, dragging out my name like chewing gum. "We've decided to upgrade the community landscaping at the front entrance. The plants need regular watering and we're short on city supply. You happen to have a well, don't you?" I stepped outside, blocking the door behind me. "Yeah, I do. And it's on my private property." She gave a laugh that didn't match her eyes. "Well, water's water, right? We're all neighbors. Lorraine, I pay for my upkeep. That well's for my house, my garden, and my use, not for a bunch of HOA petunias." She blinked like I'd slapped her. "You'll want to be careful about sounding uncooperative, Garrett. The HOA can fine homeowners for not contributing to community improvements." I leaned against the porch railing. "Try that and I'll have my lawyer send you a letter. You're not entitled to a drop." That should have ended it. A week later, I noticed a dip in the water pressure. Checked the system. Everything looked fine until I spotted fresh tire tracks near the back gate. I'd built a small pump house over the well, locked up tight, but someone had pried off the side panel and rigged a hose to it. I was furious. I replaced the panel, reinforced the lock, and installed a trail cam facing the well. Then I waited. Sure enough, 3 nights later, a white HOA maintenance truck rolled up. 2 guys got out, unlocked the gate like they owned the place, and fired up a portable tank, pumping out water straight from my well. I didn't confront them. I just saved the footage. At the next HOA meeting, I showed up early and signed in to speak. When they got to community landscaping, Lorraine stood at the front of the clubhouse, rattling off how, thanks to adaptive measures, the HOA has been able to resolve the water shortage for our front gardens. I raised my hand. "How exactly did you resolve that shortage, Lorraine?" She gave me a tight smile. "Oh, we got creative, Garrett. Sometimes you have to make do." I pulled a flash drive from my pocket. "Creative as in stealing water from my private well." Her face froze. The room went dead quiet. "You didn't," she said, voice dropping an octave. "I did," I replied, plugging the drive into the projector. The footage played crisp, clear, and damning. Her maintenance crew hauling water from my land 3 separate nights, someone in the back gasped. A guy near the front muttered, "Is that legal?" "Oh, it's not," I said. "Which is why I've filed a police report and submitted this to my attorney. You drained over 30,000 gallons. That's theft, Lorraine." Her face turned the color of raw meat. "We were trying to help the community, no. You were trying to cut corners and thought no one would catch you." She started sputtering something about ungrateful neighbors and HOA rights, but no one was listening. I stood up. "I warned you the first time, you didn't listen. Now you're looking at nearly $90,000 in damages and theft charges." And I wasn't bluffing. 2 days after the HOA meeting erupted into chaos, I got a knock on the door, not the usual tap-tap of a neighbor dropping by, but the heavy, deliberate kind that makes a man straighten his back before answering. When I opened it, 2 deputies stood on my porch. "Mr. Collins," the taller one asked, "detectives from the County Property Crimes Division would like a word. We understand you filed a report regarding unauthorized water usage." I nodded and stepped aside. "Come in." "I've got everything ready." They followed me into the den, where my laptop was already hooked up to the TV. I pulled up the files and played the relevant clips, each time-stamped, each showing the HOA's hired crew trespassing onto my land and siphoning water. I even had a spreadsheet open, showing the estimated volume based on the pump model and run time, cross-checked with my well's output rate. The shorter deputy leaned in, eyebrows raised. "You weren't joking about tracking the volume?" You measure this all yourself. I'm a retired field engineer, I said. We measure everything. Down to the ounce if we can help it. After about 20 minutes of reviewing evidence and asking pointed questions, they thanked me and said they'd be forwarding the case to the district attorney for potential charges. I asked what kind of charges we were talking about. Well, said the taller one, trespassing for sure. Probably felony theft of natural resources. And if they used HOA funds without proper authorization, there could be financial misconduct involved too. I handed them a printed copy of the HOA's budget sheet I'd requested last month under the Community Transparency Clause. There was no line item for landscaping water acquisition. No emergency vote, no mention of the well. This'll help, the deputy said, slipping it into a folder. If there's no trace of a vote or budget approval, it strengthens the argument that the president acted without authority. That evening, I started receiving emails from neighbors. Most of them had been at the meeting. One, a woman named Heather who lived 3 houses down, wrote that she'd been on the landscaping committee until Lorraine started making unilateral decisions and shutting people out of budget meetings. Another neighbor, Jackson, attached a photo of the same maintenance truck parked behind the clubhouse right next to a large blue tank dated 2 weeks before I caught them on camera. It wasn't just water theft. They'd been storing it, likely to make it look like they were paying for it from somewhere legitimate. I compiled everything into a single PDF and sent it to the detective's office. By the next morning, I had a voicemail waiting. Mr. Collins, this is Detective Mendez. We've opened a formal investigation. We'll be interviewing the HOA board under subpoena. You'll be kept informed. Things moved fast after that. 3 days later, Lorraine Kessler was served right in front of the clubhouse. Not just her. Either 2 board members who'd signed off on the landscaping work orders were also handed subpoenas. The 4th board member, a retired librarian named Marla, came to my door that evening with a trembling cup of coffee in her hand. I didn't know what she was doing, she said, eyes darting toward the street every few seconds. She told us the water was being donated by a local farm, that the crew was just moving it to the tanks for storage. I didn't ask questions, God help me, Garrett, I should have. I nodded slowly, letting her talk. She's been running the board like a monarchy, Marla continued. She even started pushing through fines for things that weren't in the bylaws. Threatened to suspend voting rights if people didn't comply. You have copies of those notices? I asked. Marla pulled a folder from her tote bag. I brought everything. The next day, I met with my attorney, a former land use prosecutor named Sheila Dorsey. She was as sharp as a tack and twice as fast. After reviewing the evidence, she filed a civil suit for damages totaling $92,000, not just for the water stolen, but for the cost to repair the well's pump system, the security upgrades I'd made, and the legal costs I'd incurred. What they did, Sheila said, wasn't just petty theft. It was a coordinated misuse of private property for self-benefit. That's actionable on several fronts. Think she'll settle? I asked. She'll have to, Sheila said. Because if this goes to court, she's not just paying you back. She's looking at being barred from ever holding a fiduciary position again. Meanwhile, the HOA's reputation was disintegrating. A group of residents started circulating a petition to remove the entire board. They needed 60% of the neighborhood's signatures. They got 73 within 4 days. I didn't even have to knock on doors. People came to mine, furious about the lies, the secrecy, and the blatant abuse of power. One man, Curtis, who ran a landscaping business himself, told me he'd been approached by Lorraine the month before. She asked if I'd be willing to falsify invoices, he said, shaking his head. Said it was for emergency funds allocation and that I'd be paid under the table. I walked. Curtis gave me a copy of the email she sent. It included a fake invoice template and a request to backdate it by 3 weeks. I forwarded it to Sheila and the detectives. 2 weeks after the subpoenas landed, the county filed formal charges against Lorraine and 2 board members for felony theft, criminal trespass, and misuse of HOA funds. At the same time, the civil suit moved forward. Lorraine's lawyer tried to delay proceedings, filing a motion to dismiss based on community necessity. The judge didn't even entertain it. No necessity justifies theft of private resources, he ruled. Motion denied, trial date set. The trial wasn't dramatic. Lorraine took a deal to avoid jail time, agreeing to pay restitution and resign from the HOA permanently. The other 2 board members took similar deals, plus probation. The court ordered them to reimburse the HOA for any misused funds, and they were barred from serving on any residential board for 10 years. The civil settlement came shortly after. Lorraine's insurance covered part of the damages her personal policy. Not the HOA's, and the rest came from a lien placed on her rental property across town. I used the money to upgrade the well system, install a new security gate, and fund a neighborhood resource website that tracked HOA actions, voting records, and budget allocations. Transparency, enforced by the people. Within 3 months, a new board was elected, one that included Curtis, Heather, and Marla. They rewrote the bylaws to limit discretionary spending, require disclosure of all vendor relationships, and mandate quarterly audits by an independent accountant. I didn't join the board. I didn't need to. My job was done, but I did put up a new sign on my back gate. Just a small metal plaque, tastefully made, private well. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Again, the first board meeting under the new leadership wasn't held in the clubhouse. It was held in Curtis's backyard, folding chairs, lemonade pitchers, and a whiteboard propped up between 2 sawhorses. About 30 residents showed up, more than had ever attended under Lorraine's thumb. The mood was cautious but hopeful. People weren't just angry anymore, they were ready to fix things. Curtis stood in front of everyone, marker in hand, and he didn't waste time. "We've got a mess to clean up," he began. "The HOA's finances are a disaster. No audits, no paper trails for half the vendor payments and the landscaping budget. Overdrawn by nearly $24,000. Heather, seated beside him with a stack of folders, added, "We've already contacted a forensic accountant. We want to know where every cent went. If there's more fraud buried in the books, we'll dig it out." Nobody interrupted. Nobody had to. What Lorraine did had woken people up. They wanted transparency, and for once they were getting it. After the meeting, Curtis pulled me aside near the tool shed. "I know you're not interested in being on the board," he said, "but we could use your help in another way, quietly." I raised an eyebrow. "How quietly are we talking?" Lorraine didn't just steal water. She used HOA funds to pay a company that doesn't exist. "We only found out because the accountant flagged the tax ID. It was registered to a P.O. box. We're trying to trace where the money went." I crossed my arms. "You think she was laundering through it? We're not sure. But we can't prove anything unless we get access to those bank statements she kept off the books." I agreed to help, not because I wanted to get involved again, but because I couldn't ignore what was starting to look like a larger scheme. Plus, I had contacts, people from my engineering days in municipal contracting. One of them worked at the county auditor's office. That week, I made a few calls. By the following Friday, I had a copy of a flagged report the auditor had received months ago. It was a complaint from a former HOA contractor, anonymous, claiming they'd been paid through a shell company and asked to reroute payments to a private account. The contractor refused and quit. The report had been filed and then buried due to insufficient corroborating evidence. I drove it straight to Sheila. She read it, looked up, and said, "This changes everything. If she set up a fake vendor, that's wire fraud. She's already on the hook for property theft, but this could bring in the feds." Sheila submitted a formal request to reopen the county's investigation, attaching the new report and bank routing numbers. The district attorney's office didn't wait. They launched a financial crimes task force within the week. 2 detectives contacted me the next morning, this time from the Economic Crimes Division. We met at a coffee house halfway between my place and the courthouse. I brought my notes, including the contractor's complaint and the P.O. box address the accountant had traced. Detective Langley, a stocky woman with a voice like sandpaper, leaned over the table. She used HOA funds to pay a vendor that doesn't exist. Where did the money go? I passed her a printout from the accountant's findings. Into an account registered under Kessler Holdings. She set it up 3 years ago. It's got over $160,000 sitting in it. Langley's partner, a younger guy named Rivas, whistled under his breath. That's not just mismanagement. That's embezzlement. They left with everything I gave them. 4 days later, the task force executed a search warrant on Lorraine's house. Neighbors watched from behind hedges and porch railings as investigators hauled out boxes of documents, 3 hard drives, and the desktop tower from her home office. Then came the second wave. More subpoenas were issued, but this time, they weren't just for the HOA board. They went to the HOA's former accountant, the landscaping crew leader, and even a notary who'd signed off on several of Lorraine's vendor contracts that were never filed with the county. Curtis called me 2 days after the raid. They found something in her garage. A second set of books, handwritten, showed payments to companies that never did any work. She'd been funneling funds for years. How much are we talking? I asked. Upwards of 200 grand, maybe more. She used it to buy a lake house. It's already under asset freeze. I sat there, phone still in my hand, thinking about how it had all started with a stolen hose and a broken panel on my well. The task force filed formal charges against Lorraine not just for water theft, but for wire fraud, mail fraud, falsifying financial records, and operating a fraudulent business for personal gain. The district attorney's office worked fast, building a case that spanned 5 years of activity. They froze all her assets, including the lake house, 2 investment accounts, and the rental property that had been used to partially pay my settlement. But what shocked everyone most was what came next. During a review of the confiscated hard drives, investigators found a trove of emails between Lorraine and a developer group called Blue Horizon Properties. In them, Lorraine had promised to soften resistance to rezoning applications by leveraging HOA influence. In exchange, she received quarterly consulting fees. Heather brought that bombshell to the next community meeting. This time the crowd was twice as large. Some people stood in the street, arms folded, listening in stunned silence. She was prepping to sell off part of the greenbelt, Heather told them. It's protected land, but with enough board votes and public indifference, she could have pushed the city council to rezone it for commercial use. Someone shouted, she was going to sell out the neighborhood. Another voice added, she nearly did. Curtis stepped forward, holding up a stack of signed affidavits. That's why we're taking it all the way, not just to clean up her mess, but to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. The board voted unanimously to hire an independent auditor for annual reviews. They also passed a new bylaw requiring resident approval for any future land use discussions. No more backroom deals, no more secrecy. The city council got involved next. A council member named Rivera reached out to me personally, asking for a meeting. We've been watching the Briar Hills case closely, she said. It's not the only neighborhood where this kind of corruption could be happening. What you exposed, it's bigger than local politics. She asked if I'd be willing to testify at a public hearing on HOA reform. I agreed, but I told her one thing first. I'm not a politician. I'm not interested in grandstanding, she nodded. Good, we don't need grandstanding, we need the truth. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of a packed chamber, explaining how a woman with a clipboard and a smile had nearly drained more than just my well. She'd nearly drained the soul out of an entire community. I didn't make it about me. I made it about the system. About the loopholes that let unelected boards act like private governments, about how secrecy breeds abuse. After my testimony, the council voted to draft new legislation. It proposed mandatory audits for all HOAs above a certain size, criminal penalties for financial misconduct, and a public registry of all board contracts. I returned home that evening to a quiet porch and a full moon. The new security lights along the back fence clicked on automatically, casting a pale glow over the pump house. It stood silent and sealed, stronger than before. Curtis texted to say the greenbelt was officially protected by a conservation easement now. No board could ever touch it again. I didn't reply. I just looked out at the yard, took a deep breath, and listened to the faint hum of the well system, steady and clean. The way it should be. The first indication that things weren't entirely over came from the county clerk's office. I was dropping off documentation for the easement Curtis's team had finalized when the clerk, a middle-aged woman with thick glasses and a sharper memory, glanced at the name on the file and paused. "You're Collins, right?" she asked, flipping through the stamped pages. "The one from Briar Hills?" I nodded. "That's me." She leaned in slightly and lowered her voice. "Something odd came through here last week. A quitclaim deed involving a small parcel along the eastern trail in your neighborhood. Signed by someone listed as acting HOA trustee, but that parcel was registered as community land. Deeds like that usually require a full board vote, not just a signature." I asked for a copy and she handed it over. The signature was from a name I didn't recognize: Gregory Dalton. I hadn't seen him at any meetings and I knew everyone on the new board. Something was off back home. I pulled up the parcel map. The land in question was a narrow strip between the trail and the creek bed. It was unremarkable on its face, but it formed the only legal buffer between Briar Hills and a stretch of unincorporated land zoned for commercial use. I called Curtis. "You ever heard of a Gregory Dalton?" There was a pause on the line. "Yeah," Curtis finally said. "He was an alternate board member Lorraine added last year, never attended a meeting, never voted on anything. We thought he dropped out after the overhaul. Turns out he didn't." That evening, Curtis and I dug through the HOA's digital records. Greg Dalton's name popped up only once in a sign-in sheet from the previous August, and again in an archived email chain where Lorraine had appointed him temporarily while Marla was on medical leave. No resignation, no removal, no follow-up. "He's a ghost," Curtis muttered. "Not quite," I said, pulling up the county's business registry. Gregory Dalton was listed as the registered agent of a company called East Trail Holdings LLC, formed just 5 weeks after Lorraine's arrest. The address: a law office downtown that specialized in commercial development. Curtis rubbed his jaw. "You think she set him up to keep the rezoning scheme alive?" "She didn't just set him up," I said. "She left him a back door." We brought it to the board the next morning. Heather contacted the HOA's attorney, who confirmed that the quitclaim deed had been filed improperly. It hadn't gone through the mechanisms required by the new bylaws. Worse, the deed had been notarized by the same notary who previously signed off on Lorraine's fake vendor contracts. That was the final thread. Heather contacted the district attorney's office with the new information. The Financial Crimes Division looped in a real estate fraud investigator. Within 2 days, they issued a cease transfer order on the parcel and flagged East Trail Holdings for investigation. I was called in again to the grand jury this time. Not just to testify about the water theft or the financial manipulation, but about the pattern. The layering of fake trustees, the forged documents, the shell companies. A slow-motion land grab wrapped in HOA paperwork. When I walked into the courthouse, I passed Lorraine in the hallway. She was out on bond, flanked by 2 attorneys. Her posture was different, no swagger, no smile. Her eyes met mine exactly once, and she looked away. Inside, I laid out everything. The stolen water was just the beginning. It had been a test, I told them. A small theft to see what she could get away with. Then came the fake landscaping invoices, the ghost companies, the hidden bank accounts, and now an illegal land deed to smooth the way for a private developer. She didn't just steal from me, I said. She stole from the entire neighborhood. From public trust, and she almost got away with it. The grand jury returned a superseding indictment a week later, 15 new counts of fraud, conspiracy, and attempted illegal transfer of protected land. Gregory Dalton was arrested in his office. Investigators found a burner phone filled with texts between him and Lorraine where she'd laid out instructions, line by line. One of the messages read, "Once you file the deed, Blue Horizon will cover the transfer fees. They want the title clean by end of quarter." There it was again. Blue Horizon, the same developer group she'd been dealing with before. But this time, the dominoes fell harder. The county launched a full-scale audit of all property transfers involving Briar Hills over the past 5 years. They discovered 2 more parcels that had been quietly reassigned, both adjacent to protected zones. Fake signatures, forged notary stamps. Lorraine's fingerprints were everywhere. Then came the federal charges: mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud the public. The FBI's white-collar division took over the case. A quiet boom echoed through the neighborhood when the news broke. It wasn't just a local scandal anymore. It was a federal case. The HOA board, now fully staffed with people who actually lived in the neighborhood and had no interest in power grabs, worked with city officials to place permanent conservation easements on every greenbelt and trailside parcel. They also pushed through an amendment to the HOA charter that eliminated alternate trustee positions entirely. Curtis got a call from a state senator's office asking for input on a bill that would increase oversight on HOAs throughout the state. He looped me in. We spent 2 afternoons drafting language that would require a rotating audit every 2 years for any HOA handling over $100,000 annually. It passed the following spring. As for Lorraine, she took a plea deal. 28 months in a low-security federal facility, full forfeiture of the stolen money, and a lifetime ban from serving on any residential board or real estate trust. Her lake house was auctioned. The funds were split between restitution and a community development grant. I received my final check from the settlement 6 weeks later. It came with a note from the court-appointed trustee managing her forfeiture account: simple, typed, and unemotional, final disbursement. Case closed. I deposited it and didn't look back. The neighborhood changed, but not in the way I'd feared. There was no paranoia, no witch hunts. People were more involved, more present. We had quarterly barbecues now, not board meetings. The clubhouse was repurposed into a shared event space, and the new board posted every transaction online within 72 hours. One evening, I was walking the trail behind my property when I passed the pump house. The new security camera blinked green above the door. I stopped for a moment, listening to the steady churn of the system below. Curtis jogged up behind me, slowing when he saw where I was. "Still holding up?" he asked. "Better than ever," I said. He nodded, then pointed toward the creek. "You hear they're building a footbridge across the bend. Community project, volunteers only." I looked out at the spot he meant. The water shimmered under the fading light, untouched and clean. Beside it, a sign had gone up. Not official. Handmade, painted on reclaimed wood, staked into the ground: our land, our voice, our watch. I turned back toward the trail. "Count me in,"